Special Operations, Covert Ops, Espionage, The Team House, with your hosts, Jack Murphy and David Park.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 295 of The Team House. I'm Jack Murphy here with Dave Park, and our guest on tonight's show is John Dailey. He is the author of Tough, Rugged Bastards. It is a memoir about his time in the Marine Corps, his service in Force Recon, Detachment One, and then helping to stand up MARSOC in the very beginning years. And he continues to work with MARSOC today as a civilian. John, thank you for coming on the show and sharing this your history, but this slice of Marine Corps history also.
Thanks. Well, Jack, Dave, I appreciate you having me on. I'm excited for the chance to talk with you guys.
So let's start at the beginning of your story. Tell us a bit about your upbringing and how that kind of took you towards the Marine Corps.
Yeah, I grew up along the West Virginia border on both sides at various times, um, in the kind of Appalachia foothills, and it was a great way to grow up. In the 70s, 80s. I had not a lot of neighbors. Not a lot of other kids. So it was a whole lot of me. Um, Out in the woods running around by myself. But it taught me a lot of things, uh, learned about not living off the land necessarily, but, just being very comfortable outdoors. I think I was 8 the first time I told my dad I wanted to go camping out in the woods by myself, and went out, set up my tent, got everything ready, at about like 2 in the afternoon. And, it seemed like an eternity before the sun finally went down. And when it did, it was probably I was a stubborn kid, but, it gets dark and I'd been camping plenty with my folks, but, all the sounds of the nighttime start coming out, and I really, wanted to go back home. But it was just, the stubbornness that kind of kept me out. And I think that's probably one of the things I learned kind of growing up that way. And that's stubbornness was absolutely a skill that paid off in big dividends in the Marine Corps.
And so as you grow up, you start hitting like your high school years. How is the Marine Corps starting to enter into your life?
Yeah, I had kind of known. I learned about the Marine Corps at a really early age, and kind of had it in the back of my head that that's what I wanted to do. When I got into high school, we moved. My parents got divorced, and I was on the West Virginia side now. And just as like fate would have it, the recruiter in the recruiting office it was local was a Force Recon Marine, and he had as a sniper, he kind of everything that I wanted to do, and he had the pictures up on his wall in his office, and he kind of took me under his wing, and started teaching me, prepping me. And so, throughout my high school years, the decision was made. I didn't have the grades really for anything else, so that made life a little easier. We didn't have the money for college, even if I would have. So it was a pretty easy decision, but it was one I was, when I went in, I operated on the assumption that you joined the Marine Corps and you just stayed in forever. I didn't realize that there were enlistments, right? And when they told me, they're like, "Hey, how long do you want to join for?" I was like, "Yeah, until I die, I guess." I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much what you signed up for, as it turns out, John.
It did, yeah. I mean, I loved it. I mean, you know, can't say that I loved every minute of it, but I can't
Mhm.
remember the minutes that I didn't love. And the thing that I learned that it seems to be common among special operations guys is that the times that you really love are the times that really sucked. And you don't love them at the time they're sucking, but when you get back to the rear, you're cleaning weapons and cleaning gear, and you kind of get to talk shit to other teams about how hard your patrol was, or you know how bad the mission was, or who ran out of water. It's with 24 hours to go, or ran out of chow, and then had to exfil. Those sorts of things that build teams, build communities. And that's what I loved about it.
And so you come in, what year did you join the Marines? And tell us about those early years, what it was like at that time.
Yeah, I joined in '87, right out of like 2 weeks out of high school, and it was, I think, an interesting time. Of course, you don't know it then, but yeah, it was far enough post Vietnam where a lot of the disgruntled veterans I had heard about, they weren't anywhere to be seen for the most part. There were still absolutely plenty of Vietnam vets, but most of them were, first sergeants and sergeant majors, master gunnery sergeants, things of that nature. That me as a PFC wasn't talking to anyway. I would get my ass chewed by one occasionally, but but we were still absolutely, learning or practicing all of we were preparing to fight another Vietnam, right? So all of the lessons that they had learned, I remember, and I still have, I pulled out and made copies of the other day, a relatively thick document that was just patrolling tips from I think it probably was compiled by SF guys, but everything from taping on your mags, tabs on your mags, you could pull them out quickly to cutting down the mag pouch an inch so it's easier to get your mags out. Um, Taping the spoons on your grenades and all of these things, we were just all over them. We were expecting or hoping or whatever for another Vietnam. Um, and so that's kind of my formative years in the Marine Corps, and my early years. I was in the Scout Sniper platoon, and that was Carlos Hathcock. That his book was passed around, and
Yeah.
getting the opportunity to meet him, I got to meet him. Was like meeting a freaking rock
Yeah.
star.
Chesty Puller.
So I mean, it was really, I think a good time. There wasn't a lot of money, there was a whole lot of, I mean, life in the infantry really at that time. On Monday morning, you'd, throw your ruck on and you'd hike out to the field and you'd, set up a camp and you do patrols, Tuesday through, Thursday, if you're lucky. Thursday you'd hike back, clean your weapons, turn them in, go get drunk Thursday night, and usually they just give you off Friday, so you get a 3-day week and 3-day weekend, and back at it the next week, and that was just week after week after week. So I mean, you got really really good at the basic infantry activities that lead to success.
And then as we get towards the 90s, were you, I'm trying to remember, were you a Marine embassy guard for a little while?
I was the unit that I was in. I initially started out in a sniper platoon. Um, had got the opportunity to go to sniper school, but we weren't doing a lot. So I kind of got suckered in by I think we call them career planners. I think in the Army they might be called like detailers or whatever. But the guy in the unit whose job it is to get people to sign up for special duties. And I ran into him at a party, in the barracks, and he was, found out that I was a sniper, and I'm sure I didn't make it hard for him to find out. I just
Right.
graduated from sniper school, so I'm sure I was spouting off to anybody that listened. But he was like, "Hey, man, I got a deal for you. There's this duty where you go and work at foreign embassies, and with your background as a sniper, you'll be working for the CIA in no time." And I was like, "What?" Like that sounds awesome. I'm like, sign me up. So, the unit was actually kind of pissed because I had just got back from sniper school. There's some expectation that I was going to like help train some other guys, and um, I was on the next thing smoking to Marine Security Guard school, which, as it turns out, does not involve targeting people for the CIA whatsoever. It's a whole lot of wearing your dress uniform and kind of greeting dignitaries and just basically standing guard over an embassy at night when everybody goes home. But it was a really great learning experience. While I was in Budapest was my first duty station, and that was right as the wall was coming down in '89, and the Soviets were leaving Hungary. I met the chick who would become my wife some years later, an American school teacher. So that was, that panned out. So we've been married for just over 32 years now. So that worked out pretty well. And then from there, I went to Buenos Aires, Argentina. I missed the first Gulf War because during that interim period, but and that's I don't think I talk about it in the book, but one of the kind of funny stories to come out of that is when I left Budapest right as the uh, build up for the Gulf War was happening. And so by the time I get to Argentina, it's getting ready to kick off. And there's a form in the Marine Corps called an administrative action form that you can fill out and request anything with it. And so I would go into the embassy every morning. I'd fill out one of these forms and say, "Hey, I want to go to any unit that's involved in combat." And I would turn it in to my boss, who is a gunny, an E7, and he would, I don't know what he was doing with it, but it
sliding them back across the desk to you.
Yeah, they would disappear, and the next day I'd come in and I'd fill out another one. So apparently, what he had done with them is he was taking them and passing them on to the kind of our next boss in the State Department chain of command, was the regional security officer at the embassy. And so I had been there for a couple weeks filling out these forms, and the President Bush, the senior President Bush, came to visit. And we had the opportunity, all the Marines out there, to meet him, and he's shaking our hands, and we're getting our picture taken, and he's getting ready to go into like a press conference. And when I shake his hand and say, "Hey, Sergeant Dailey, sir," he's like, "Dailey, are you the one who keeps trying to go to Iraq?" He's like, knock it off. You're not going. So I'm sure somebody had put it in his ear, but it was I was like, well, I guess I'll give up.
Out of curiosity, well, two questions. One,
Yeah.
anytime somebody met you and didn't see how your name was spelled, did they ask you if you're related to Dan Dailey?
Oh, all the time, even regardless of how it's spelled. Yeah, that was like boot camp was a kind of a horrible thing because I was just always, they'd come up, "Hey, Dan Dailey, come up here and go charge that machine gun nest," or whatever. It was always,
You got to share
always
this
something.
you got to share this piece of Marine Corps lore.
Your name
with
is spelled like his. I'm sorry about that. For some reason in my mind it was spelled differently.
You got to
It is. Yeah, his is Daly.
Oh, right, it is. This is a different
Yeah.
Dan Dailey.
Is he a Medal of Honor recipient?
I don't recall I'm embarrassed, but I don't remember my Marine Corps lore.
So yeah, Dan Dailey was actually one of two Medal of Honor recipients. So he was got the first one in China during the
Boxer Rebellion.
Yeah.
Boxer Rebellion, in like 1905.
Holy shit.
Apparently, just they had put him out on a post, and he just stacked bodies. I mean, to the point where he literally had like made a wall out of the Chinese that they were attacking. And then the second one, the second
Haiti.
one was actually down in South America in the Banana Wars.
Yeah, it's Haiti.
Nicaragua or Haiti.
Yeah,
And then-
I mean, according to Wikipedia, but
Yeah,
take that
Yeah,
as
you're
a-
right. He was, I think, a couple of machine guns had been lost in a river, and he went back like under fire and dove. They're like 50 cals, and he went and swam them up. But he was kind of more famous for during World War One in Belleau Wood
Yeah.
in France. The Marines were kind of stuck, behind a hedgerow, and the Germans who was just kind of laying waste to them. They've got a big open field they have to cross, and his famous quote was, he stood up with his pistol, started charging. I think he was a first sergeant at the time, and said, "Come on, you sons of bitches, you want to live forever." So that, of course, everybody jumped up, went after him, and that's kind of the Dan
All
Dailey.
right. So a lot for you to live up to, John.
Yeah. And I mean, isn't that also the Battle of the Woods? If I remember right, that's where the Marines got the nickname Devil Dog, right, from the Germans.
Yeah, and how much of that's accurate, I've come to understand that, I mean, the Marine Corps has always been very, very good at their own publicity,
Yeah.
and that's one of the things I'm not sure that's 100%. I'm not sure that it matters, if it's 100%
Yeah,
accurate.
right.
But yeah, the story was that the German army had awarded the term Tufelhunden to a unit, the hardest fighting unit every year within the German army. And after meeting the Marines, they decided that they would bestow that name on the Marine Corps for that year. So and then we took that name and earned or
cool.
not, or made up or not, and ran with it.
And then my second question was, you were you were not in a combat position when the first Gulf War kicked off. Did you feel crushed when it first launched?
Yeah, that was I mean, it's kind of indescribable, right? You join, especially, I mean, I had filled my head with, growing up at the time I did, like, Rambo and Chuck Norris, Missing in Action, and just everything was, these combat movies. And then, books, I was devouring books, the long range, alert books, and, Force Recon Diary, and just, so, everything that I had done was to prepare for combat, and then to have it happen, and you're setting it out, and especially setting it out, beside the pool in Buenos Aires, at the Marine House.
Right.
Um, if you had to set it out, it was a pretty good place to be, but it still it really hurt me. And then when I got back to the States and back to an infantry unit, the fact that there were young guys, running around with a stack of medals, ribbons from, I'm like, man, so I definitely felt that I had missed, my calling, and it didn't seem that there was, anything else kind of brewing on the horizon. Um, so it was really at that point, I was like, the only thing that I could do is keep kind of moving up to units that'll offer me a better opportunity.
So that
hopefully
was why
someday.
you went to Force Recon.
That was definitely a part of it. But I really enjoyed being in a sniper platoon. I really loved the work, all the discipline, the long range shooting, everything that goes into that. But I had always, recognized that Force Recon was, the kind of the tip of the spear of what the Marine Corps had, in my eyes, at least. And the problem that I had was that I really was not a great swimmer. And I mean, I could swim, well enough to get in the Marine Corps, and well enough for most things, but Force Recon, requires a pretty high level of swimming ability. And so I had tried out once and didn't make it. And it's tough, it's a tough thing to learn how to swim, when you don't. The Marine Corps doesn't give you a lot of access, surprisingly, to especially I was stationed at this point in 29 Palms, so the middle of the desert. They did have a swimming pool, so I started, hitting that up and working on that. But then I had the opportunity to try out again, and made it.
Can you real quick tell us the difference between Battalion Recon and Force Recon, both in their mission and capabilities, things like that?
Absolutely. So training, at least initial training, is the same. And throughout, a Marine's career, quite often they would start out in Battalion Recon, move over to Force, maybe be an assistant team leader, and then go back to Battalion and be a team leader. So some people would kind of have these careers where they bounce back and forth among units. I didn't. I came a little bit later. I was a sergeant when I got to Force. But the Battalion Recon is the asset of a battalion level commander. So he's there to answer that commander's information requirements. Generally speaking, within 5 to 10 miles of their kind of area of interest. Force Recon, on the other hand, works for the force commander. So it's, whoever the kind of the big wig is. When we got into Afghanistan, it wound up being Mattis. So he was the task force commander. So we were tasked with answering his requirements. So because of that, you're more likely to have like a free fall capability in though it's not exclusive to Force Recon, but it's more likely to have a more advanced free fall capability. And Force Recon also had the direct action mission. At the time when I was there, it was IHR and extremis hostage rescue.
Yeah. Now, Force was, by all measures, a special operations unit, but was not fortunate enough because of the Marine Corps. Can you tell us about that? Why they weren't included in JSOC or USOC or anything like that?
Yeah, so the whole story obviously goes back to the founding of SOCOM and after the failed attempt to rescue the Americans in the Iranian hostages. So in 1987, based on kind of that, all of the failures that happened there, the military was told, hey, you need to create a special operations entity that oversees all special operations and coordinates them. The SF was like, Roger that. They jumped over the Rangers, the SEALs, Air Force, special operations, PJs, pararescue, and the Marine Corps was invited, but the commandant at the time said no. He had a different vision for the Marine Corps, and that was, it was a great vision, but the Marine Corps formed at that point the Marine Expeditionary Unit. So at any point in time, there are generally two Marine Expeditionary Units that are on probably 3 Navy ships. So there's 3,000 or 4,000 sailors, 3,000 or 4,000 Marines out at sea, and that's kind of when we came up with the America's 911, little nickname for ourselves. So because of that, the Force Recon assets were held to be a part of that, and so we were. I was just joining the Marine Corps at that time, and it would later when I got to Force, like I said, it was not uncommon, an uncommon topic to have, when you're sitting around drinking beer to bitch and moan about us not having access to the missions, the money,
The
the
Gucci
training
gear,
in some
yeah.
cases.
Yeah, sorry I said USOC. I meant SOCOM, but yeah.
Tell us then about what Force was like in those days, in the 1990s, what you guys were up to, kind of the training and deployment schedule.
Yeah, it was. That was, in my opinion, that was a heyday of. It was. It was. They had started first Force Recon, which I was a part of, the station in Camp Pendleton, California, had been done away with after Vietnam, and they didn't stand back up until 1987.
Wow.
And they stood back up with this direct action mission. And when they started that, that was really a wild, like kind of wild west. They were, we were bringing in LAPD SWAT, who was kind of new, and LAPD SWAT was bringing in FBI HRT. A lot of other people from a lot of places were coming in, and the level of training was incredibly high, but it was also like we were talking about a little bit before we came on camera, like a lot of point shooting, a lot of some trick shooting was kind of the order of the day in some places, and you can be really good at that, at short range, and as long as you are practicing every single day, like we were the early days. There was they were bringing back from Vietnam. They'd actually developed the OEG, the occluded eye gun sight. So we were throwing those on our M16s and MP5s, which requires you to shoot with both eyes open, right? Because it's like a clear, or not a clear test tube, essentially, with a red dot in it, so you can't see through it. You had to keep both eyes open.
Oh, really?
Which is good. I mean, it's helpful, obviously, to shoot with both eyes open. But it was based on this idea. It was called the Binyon aiming concept, right? That if you keep both eyes open and shoot that way long enough, it becomes natural. So there was a lot of testing and experimentation going on. So it was a really cool time to be there. By the time I rolled in, I think things had settled down a little bit, and in my opinion, anyway, First Force Recon was recognized, certainly in the Marine Corps, as the the pinnacle of what Marine reconnaissance could be. So I had arrived with the kind of pedigree of having spent time in a sniper platoon, um, been a sniper, been to the Scout Sniper Advanced course that the Marine Corps just puts on once a year, and I had also had the opportunity to go to Ranger School and Jump School, so which kind of unusual. Um, at that time, and it was unusual that anybody outside of Force Recon would have gotten to go to Ranger School if quotas were available. So the when I checked in to First Force in '92, I got one of the Marines was asking me who I was and this and that, and it was couldn't remember my name, but he was like, hey, he was telling his platoon sergeant, he's like, hey, we should grab that guy, the Ranger. Um, so I became Ranger Dailey after that, and that's a nickname that's stuck with me now for 30 some years. And people always really curious, were you in the Rangers or before you joined the Marine Corps, or were you a park ranger or whatever? But no, it's just somebody couldn't remember my name. So
It's like when Marines attend Ranger School, they all get called Gunny.
yeah.
So as time goes on, I mean, as I understand it, and jump in if I'm misunderstanding, because the Force Recon and Recon guys were not part of special operations per se, technically. At that time, those guys had to like cycle back into infantry units, conventional units, and hopefully come back again at a higher rank. But it sounds like you got to stay there pretty much through the entire time up until Det 1 came around.
Yeah, I was lucky. There's a couple things that happened. Initially, the MOS Recon Marines 0321, it was not a primary MOS. So when you became and in the Marine Corps, if you're an infantry MOS 03, doesn't matter what you are within there, you're a grunt, you're a machine gunner, mortarman, or a recon Marine. When you become a staff sergeant, an E6, you become an 0369, which is an infantry unit leader. And at that point, you could be moved anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so quite often that would happen to recon Marines when they became promoted to staff sergeant. They would get moved out to the infantry, and they would do some time there and come back. I was fortunate. I mean, I think there was, it was known that if you were, somebody that really put out, was good at your job, then there were ways to find a way for you to stay. And often, as long as you kept deploying, you were staying active in a platoon, then you were kind of safe. So at that time, there were a lot of guys who were staying for a good while, and I was able to stay for about 10 years there, and work my way up from point man to platoon sergeant, and would have stayed, I think, longer if I could have.
So tell us where you were on 9/11 and sort of that run up to, for Afghanistan.
Yeah, so that is always kind of makes an interesting story on 9/11. In the moments before the first plane hit the first tower, I was sitting in a pub in Darwin, Australia, with my team leaders drinking beer. So I was a platoon sergeant for a Force Recon platoon, and we had just left on deployment on the ships with the Marine Expeditionary Unit that I was talking about. Our first stop had been Darwin, and we spent a couple of days there training with the Australians, some snipers. So we had a range. We were out shooting. We finally wrapped up, came back, cleaned up, and had our first night out on the town. And so the Australia, if you haven't been, and I haven't been back in a while, but there's the the woman to man ratio is out of kilter, right? So there's all of the young guys were like super excited because there's tons of ladies running around. I had I was married. I had my team leaders were all married, and we're like, hey, let's just go find someplace quiet, get some beers. So we find an Irish pub, of course. There's one everywhere. Kitty O'Shea's Irish pub. So we're kind of tucked in the corner, drinking beer, and there's playing soccer on the big screen above the bar, and then it switches to the first tower, and within minutes, the Marines who were designated as the shore patrol to try to keep people out of trouble come running into the bar, yelling, "Get back to the boats, back to the boats!" And then they were just down the street yelling in every bar. So we eventually, we finished our beer and then kind of finished all the beer they would let us buy, and then eventually made our way back to the boat. And when we woke up the next morning, they had somehow managed to wrangle, everybody, and we were out at sea.
And so what was, your unit's mission at that point? I mean, were you kind of just like out at sea waiting for further orders? What happened?
We had already had a prior commitment to go into East Timor, which is just kind of off the coast, a little tiny country, and they had just been on the back end of a pretty nasty civil war, and they had won their independence, and they were going. I think it was on. It was about this time. It was just before. It was maybe the 10th or the 11th, or not the 10th, the 12th or the 13th. They were going to be signing their constitution, and so it was a big event. The Navy Commodore and our commander, the MU commander, had to attend this thing. So there was obviously security concerns. So we wound up providing a security detail for our commander, and the SEALs provided one for the Commodore. So we were kind of running around in East Timor with those guys for the day, and then from there we kind of headed straight for the closest coast to Afghanistan, which was Pakistan. By October we had established some FARPs and just got a staging bases in around Jalalabad, and then by November we were in Afghanistan.
Cool. So after so many years of waiting, finally got to answer the call that you had heard.
The balloon went up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I still, we got there, we were kind of got our feet under us for a couple of days, and we were tasked with doing a vehicle reconnaissance to find a route from where we were, which was called Fob Rhino, kind of out in the middle of nowhere, up to Kandahar. And so me and my boys went out, left at night, spent 2 nights, about 100 miles of kind of cross compartment going through the desert, finding a route, and eventually brought up a larger unit to just kind of establish essentially a big patrol base and start trying to stir some shit up. We spent, we were going out every night looking for, at the time, really bad satellite images of, expected, Taliban positions, and we'd get there and it'd be, a bunch of rocks and a couple of trees, and they thought they were vehicles, and it's things have absolutely improved over the last 20 years, but I got pulled in on the December 7th, and by the battalion commander that we were out with, and he was like, "Hey, I need you guys to go out and interdict traffic coming between Kandahar and to the west out towards Lashkar." So we, kind of came up with a plan. We weren't going to at the time everybody was declared hostile. So I mean, and we were within our rights to just set up machine guns and blast any car that went down the road. I wasn't cool with that. I could imagine, I didn't want my guys, you know, approaching a vehicle that we shot up and finding a bunch of, a family that was trying to get
Right.
out or whatever. So, they kind of, the Afghanis had been through enough of that with the Taliban. So I put it to the team leaders. They came up with a plan to execute essentially what was close to a mission that we trained for quite a bit, a vehicle takedown. When you have a vehicle that you got to stop, and then you've got to determine whether the bad guys are in it, and then shoot them if they are, right, or snatch them up. And that's what we wound up kind of setting up. We strung concertina wire across the road, kind of positioned ourselves off. I put one of my other vehicles on as a base of fire just in case things went to shit. And I was talking with air, and pretty soon they let us know that there was a small convoy that was headed our way out of Kandahar. And at that point, sitting there, and this is December, Afghanistan, it's fucking freezing cold. We're kind of sitting there shivering, and I told everybody, I'm like, hey, man, I think I'm like an anti, bullet magnet, right? I've been in the Marine Corps at this point for 14 years, and I've barely heard, a couple of shots fired in anger. And I haven't returned fire on any of them. So I don't know that it's going to happen tonight. So I was, kind of talking I didn't want guys to, I wanted to, one, kind of keep it light, because we were either gonna, do some shit or we weren't, right? And you don't want, you don't want guys so hyper that they're, jerking the trigger at anything. So, we talked just about, hey, we've done this shit a million times in practice, right? There's nothing different than that. So let's just treat it like that. We've rehearsed it, not, that was one of the things that was kind of pounded in my head as a young guy. You don't rehearse until you get it right. You rehearse until you can't get it wrong. So, and I had kind of tried to push that on my guys. So eventually the lead vehicle of this convoy, the other two vehicles, which were larger, like 5-ton trucks, had pulled off. And the lead vehicle was kind of scouting ahead, and it pulled up, shot past us, saw the concertina wire because we had hung chem lights on it, and it said, screw it, I'm going for it. And watching a vehicle, at 60 miles an hour hit concertina wire is pretty fucking astounding. I mean, you don't get far, man. It didn't get far. It gets snatched up. As soon as that wire wraps around the axles, it shuts them down pretty quick. We had, popped up onto the road way behind them. And as soon as we did, I could see, sitting in the back of this dually or a dual cab truck, there were, 3 guys, with AKs. The front was stuffed full of guys. It was like a clown car. The back of the bed of the truck was packed full of, boxes and crates and things like that. So we didn't know what was in them. But my vehicle stops. I jump out of the vehicle commander seat, kind of rush up, and my guys kind of roll in behind me. And I yelled, "Hey, put your hands up!" I don't quite know where that came from, but it was giving them a chance. The funny thing is that at that moment, and it was the first time I'd experienced it, but I'd read about it, like Grossman and On Killing, the like time distortion, how time changes, and how like a lot of once loud noises started, once shooting started, it didn't sound like shooting, right? It was just like little pops. Kind of the visual perceptual narrowing where your world kind of starts to collapse down under the threat in front of you. And so all of these things started happening. And luckily, like I knew what they were because I had, like I said, we read about it. I talked to guys about it. The 3 guys in the bed of the truck were obviously the primary threat. The guy in the middle, the guys on either side had, because it was so cold, had their AKs bundled up in blankets and their hands bundled up. And the guy in the middle, who was an old, Mooj, it wasn't his first rodeo. You could see his hands were red, but he had his hands on his weapon, and it was, it was comical how slowly he was, like he seemed to be moving, trying to bring his weapon up on me. Um, and so, I shoot him, and one of the weird things, is that there's a thing called persistent shooting, where, if you shoot someone and what you expect to happen doesn't happen, then you just keep shooting, right? You expect the guy to fall down. He doesn't fall down, and he couldn't because he was propped up in all these crates. But I shot him a number of times, more than enough, before I went ahead and did, what we had been, trained to do and turn it into a box drill. Um, but by this point, I've got, other guys are up there with me. They're engaging. And then the concertina wire had run down the length of the vehicle. So they were having trouble opening the doors. They're trying to roll down windows and jump out the windows. And it turned into a kind of a comical scene. Um, but about that time, the bed of the truck burst into flames and it spread, very, very quickly. I mean, it was which led the people that were still in the bed or in the cab of the truck to really try to get the hell out. So now they're climbing out and we're popping them. They're falling in the concertina wire and it's just turned into a kind of a shit show. But some rounds start popping off, and at the time I thought they were being fired. I didn't realize that they were cooking off that quickly. So we start bounding back, and then RPGs, rockets start like sailing, filling the night sky. They're not armed, and they weren't launched. They were cooking off. So they're like spiraling, through the air. So it got a little spicy, I guess, for a little bit, but we pulled back, made sure we had, got our men, weapons, and equipment, got a check, and that was really it. We brought in fast movers on the other two vehicles that were sitting out in the desert, and really that kind of, other than the fifth group guys that were up in the mountains, that was the first kind of engagement of Afghanistan.
So, as you get back to the United States after that deployment, tell us about how this bold new experiment called Detachment One comes about.
Absolutely. So we started, I mean, by what we didn't know is by that time, by, middle December, the Secretary of Defense had already made the decision that there needed to be more special operations. Special Operations Command was going to take the lead for the war on terror. Um, so, the Army was told, make more Green Berets and, Rangers, the Navy, more SEALs, Air Force, more CCT guys and PJs. And he said, hey, Marine Corps, this time you guys are going to participate. And still the Marine Corps was like, nah, man, we're, rummy. We're good. We don't want to do that. And it took some doing and eventually, and to be honest, SOCOM wasn't too eager to have Marines on board either from, everything I gathered. So there was actually about a year time kind of gap between the time I got back in 2002 and the time Det One stood up. So there was a lot going on kind of behind the scenes that I didn't know about, but ultimately the decision was that the Marine Corps would provide a small unit that would serve as a proof of concept for a couple of years. So they would train, deploy with a special operations architecture over top of them, and then be evaluated on how well they did. So when I got back from that deployment, I was told that, hey, you've really been here now too long. You've got to go somewhere. So luckily, I just went down the street to the Special Operations Training Group and took over the urban sniper course, which was great to get back behind the gun, seriously, and got definitely bust the rust off on my shooting skills. So, but that job only lasted for about a year because I got kind of tapped on the shoulder at a meeting and Colonel Coates, who was selected to be our boss, was like, hey, Ranger, do you, I've got tapped for this thing. Do you want in? And of course, it's, not a hard question to answer.
Right.
Well, hell yeah, I went in. And, he asked me to be a team leader. So there were going to be initially 4 teams. The charter was for 78 men. That eventually grew to closer to 100. But of that 100 men, there was roughly a third were Force Reconnaissance Marines. About a third were intel, and that's really what kind of set us apart was the huge intel support that we had. And then the other third ran the gamut from, communicators and fires guys and administrative guys and mechanics and everything else that you need to run a unit.
So that's small an element. I mean, then we're talking about like 35, 40, like a platoon-sized element of operators, and then the rest of the unit is enablers.
Yeah, and we were, I think, about 30. So, and that was with our Navy corpsmen that are, each team had a corpsman. So initially, I think I had a 7-man team. I had me, 5 Marines at a corpsman. One communicator was in there, and I was the junior guy. I was an E7. I put on, got promoted to gunny right before 9/11, but the other guys were guys that I had kind of looked up to as being like like the next senior class or whatever, guys who had a couple of years on me. And so I was, and I don't know if it was anybody else felt that way, but and I talk a lot in the book about the idea of imposter syndrome. All right. Not quite thinking that you deserve to be where you are. And, people bitch and moan about it a lot. I mean, I'm thankful every day for it. I think it pushed me to, kind of, always strive to be better, but to prove myself. But so I told my team very early on, like, hey guys, we're going to do whatever mission, shit mission needs to be done. We'll be the ones to do it. So, particularly as we started, because I was coming from that role as a sniper instructor, I got put in charge of all kind of sniping, overseeing our sniping program, which led, came in handy later on. And I had picked a couple of the guys that I picked had worked for me in that role. So we had a very robust, sniper capability that wasn't as terribly common. So then particularly once we started doing direct action missions, everybody wants to be the guys blowing the door off and clearing the house. I was like, hey man, we'll do the RNS on the objective. We'll, which my guys would bitch and moan about sometimes, but, be the guys who, went in 2 days before, laid in the snow or the mud or whatever, and took pictures and reported back. And that ultimately, kind of just led to our team being the go-to guys for anything that was, more challenging or kind of out of the ordinary.
And at this time period, I mean, it's very interesting what you write about, the whole process of standing up Det One. You were also involved in like some R&D and like going down to, you went down somewhere and were working with a R&D guy developing new gear and stuff. Yeah.
So I had one of the great things about first Force Recon during that time when Colonel Coates was the CEO was that he was always pushing us to, go out and, find new stuff, right? New gear. We were, within the Marine Corps, we were I'm pretty sure the first guys to start, running aim points on first on our MP5s. And then, when we got M4s, throwing them on M4s, there was just a lot of firsts and a lot of equipment.
Why can't you just use iron sights, John?
Well,
what's wrong with iron sights?
You could do that, and it's you gotta be able to shoot with iron sights. But I'm always a big fan of anything that makes the job easier. so we had a pretty we were accustomed to doing that, to going like seeking out vendors and things like that, and we had a really bad helicopter accident a couple of years before when I was at First Force 99, and helicopter was a bunch of our guys were uh, going to do a ship takedown, and so they were going to fast rope onto the deck of a ship. The pilot came in and misjudged the height and caught his skid on a net, the like big steel net, flipped the helo over, and they sunk. Um, so we had a bunch of our guys died, a crew chief and the helicopter died. And one of the things that came out of that was that the equipment that we were wearing was crazy heavy. Right? Our bullet bouncers and everything were very, very early generation stuff. When that happened, I got grabbed to go and work with the Marine Corps to build a better suite of kind of amphibious capable
More
body armor.
survivable gear.
Yeah, and that definitely kind of put me, in that world with so Natick Laboratories is the Army Research Center where they make MREs and boots and everything in between. Uh, I got to go up there and got to make a lot of contacts and friends. So they came in handy, when it came time to start kitting ourselves out for. Because even in '99, when we started building that equipment suite, it was green camouflage. That's what everything was. We still assumed that we were going to be in the jungle somewhere. Even though we'd had the previous war had been as short as it was in the desert, but so that was you know you know making building out a flat earth or tan suite of gear and taking a look at it after some time. We had in the interim we developed a cutaway process for body armor that hadn't existed before that, and they used spare air bottles and kind of a litany of one of the Marines that in the old days we used to back when telephones had cords on them, we would go into offices and steal their phone cords and use the phone cord to make a lanyard for our pistol. Right, a couple of fishing leaders, this flex cuffed with little tiny flex cuffs, and that was how you secured your. Because if you're fast roping, onto the deck of a ship, your pistol comes out. It could be disastrous. So, one of the Marines was very fortunate that he was able to break that the telephone cord or the connection on that telephone cord. So, we got people to make breakaway lanyards, and the list went on of innovations that came out of that.
And so tell us then about, the first and really only deployment that Detachment One did to Iraq. Where did you guys deploy to, and sort of what was like the idea of what this deployment would be versus what it was when, you guys land on the ground and things start to change?
Yeah, so we stood up in, I should know the date, March 2003. And for, like I said, we had no equipment and things for a while. But as we started getting outfitted and started prepping, we really believed, and I don't know if it was our own, what we wanted to believe, but thought that we were going to Afghanistan. And kind of assumed, I think, because we were, reconnaissance was, one of our missions, that's what we would do. So we started doing a lot of preparation for that. A lot pretty heavily in sniping, heavily in deep ground reconnaissance, vehicle mounted reconnaissance. And about halfway through the time that we had to train, the decision was finally made that we would be going to Iraq, much more kinetically focused deployment. And we were going to serve essentially as a SEAL or NSW task unit. So we would be a task unit underneath the Naval Special Warfare Task Group. That's who we would report to. So we get on the ground in early 2004 and are assigned to hang out kind of in an area around Baghdad. So we were near one of Saddam's, kind of near the Bayap, the compound, the airport in Baghdad. That's where we lived, and we're we got on the ground to find out. Normally, when you do a turnover, you get in country, you do a turnover with another unit, right? RIPTOA, do a relief in place, and they're like, hey, here's all of the information that we have. Here's all the bad guys that we haven't gone after. So we didn't have that. There had not been a SEAL platoon in place, there. So we were really kind of put in a position where we had to make our own luck. All right. We had, and we weren't, it's a weird situation. And the SEALs wound up being great. The commander that we worked for was very supportive and straight shooter. But you also didn't quite know who you could trust. Who had your best interests at heart and who was hoping that you wouldn't be successful.
Yeah.
So we had one of our, and it's really where those big crew of intel guys came to play. A couple of things happened that seemed to be unfortunate initially, but wound up being the best thing that could have happened. So the SEAL commander that owned us was like, hey, you guys have got like 30 intel dudes. I don't have that many, in my whole task unit. So he was, as was his right, he was like, hey, I'm going to take some of these guys and send them over to work with one of my SEAL platoons over here and these guys over here. Of course, we're pissed because with my team, I had my own human guy, my own SIGINT guy, my own like geospatial guy. So that changed the way that we operated. But what we quickly came to realize was that now we had our eyes and ears, attached to everybody all over the country. So it wasn't long before, these guys are just, talking and, realize that, hey, we've got probably a better kind of overall picture of intel of what's going on in the country than anybody does. And one of our intel analysts was bored, just kind of digging through intel reports and found a report that about a Iraqi interpreter who was working for the U.S. that had been executed. And he started here. Thought he had read something else, so he started digging back through these intel reports and realized that over the span of the past 6 months, there had been like 20 of these interpreters who had been killed. And being an intel guy, he started trying to connect dots and just like stringing yarn across the wall or whatever with pictures and things. I don't know how he did it, but ultimately he came up and was like, hey, here's this one interpreter that's like connected, to all of these dead interpreters. So the interpreter was a woman. The only way that we knew to get her was to go to the place where she was working, during the day, which meant low profile, civilian vehicles kind of going in low profile. So that's when all of the taking the missions nobody else wanted kind of paid off. So all of us team leaders gather around, and of course it's the first mission that we're doing, so everybody wants it. And the decision was, they're like, hey, Dailey, you're the guy for this one because you've done all the odd one-off type of things. So I had, because it was a female we were going after, I had to take a female to search her, and the only female we had available to us was a Polish Grom operator. She was the only female operator that they had, and she was phenomenal. Or she was would put any I always think of her when people talk about what women are capable of. Right, she had was I think their most lethal sniper that they had. She was incredibly talented, but so she came with me, another Marine, and we had to take a SEAL, kind of a human guy with us, and one of our intel guys, civvies in a vehicle driving around Baghdad, and it just so happened that we kept like we were like 5 minutes behind her, everywhere we stopped, or we missed her by like a day or two. And so we finally get to a place where she had most recently been, and we're able to get her to come in, under the guise of picking up a paycheck or whatever, and grabbed her and grabbed the man that was driving her. Um, and then we get her back. And at this point, this is before kind of the Abu Ghraib thing, just like weeks before. But we were able to have our own interrogation facility, and brought her in. And once they started talking to her, pretty quickly realized that she was the one. She was responsible for all these deaths, but she was unwittingly responsible. She had a hot looking Iraqi dude had, approached her, and they hit it off, and she was not deserving of a hot looking Iraqi dude. She was an elderly, not elderly, but an older, an older lady. So there should have been some red flags, but and he, however, got her to hand over phone lists and information for other contracted interpreters. So when she found out, she was, there's the saying that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. She was fucking pissed. Like I mean, really fucking pissed. So she was like, hey, here's his address, here's his friend's address, there's this other guy. And so that night, we went out, hit his house, his place of business, and his place of business, the business that he was in was apparently making bombs, because it was just a bomb making factory. And then from there, you grab computers, you grab explosives, you grab paperwork, and then that starts leading mission to mission. And after that, we were like, just every night we were out and about.
John, out of curiosity, was one of the reasons why you guys kind of had to pick, whatever mission you get is because you were late to the party when it came to SOCOM, and that people, like, I think some people think you guys are interchangeable with SEALs, right? And if SEALs already have this mission, why are we going to give it to this new group of guys? I'm not saying you guys are interchangeable with SEALs. I'm just saying that sometimes I think that's the...
Yeah, I don't. I think like I was willing to take any mission that in training, because I wanted to be the guy that they relied on, when it wasn't. In this case, I think we wanted to prove ourselves. We were going to take anything that came down, and we knew that it was going to have to, Intel was going to have to drive ops, and then ops Intel. So we were going to have to, make our own luck, build our own target packages. And really, once we got got our first one knocked out, it was like we were, as busy as we could be. We were turning stuff away. And then I think we pretty quickly established a reputation as being a unit that would, do a good job, not step on other people's toes. There was a lot of, especially at that time, it was a little Wild West in Baghdad at that point. So there were, we started, working with ODAs that had, tons of sources and tons of targets, but, because of the way they were split up, didn't have the ass to action them. Right. So, they would say, hey, we've got to hit this guy's house, but he's one of our sources. So, please don't blow his door off, or please don't. And so we're like, hey, man, yeah, we can, don't fuck his house up too bad. Yeah, we can do that. And so we pretty quickly got a reputation of being somebody that other people wanted to work with. And then like I said, it just became the point where we were incredibly busy.
I'm sorry, I was just going to ask, who were you guys using as like your blocking positions and security and stuff like that? Was it other Marines, or were there like Army units that you guys would use?
Most of the time it was the other 60 guys in the unit. So we had one of the things that absolutely made the unit kind of as special as it was that Colonel Coates's philosophy was that, everybody fights. So we would, run, he would have us put on shooting packages for the all the support guys, all the enablers. All the intel dudes everybody was kitted out the same, right? So there were times when things got a little bit dicey. You weren't quite sure about the reservist that had been attached to us as an armorer who was manning the 50 cal, but uh, we would always keep one of our teams kind of in reserve and with the vehicles. So usually we'd have like one operator with each vehicle to kind of just control the fight in and around that vehicle. But there were occasions where we were able to use Army units or even some Iraqis. Once they got up and running, or other Marine units. The push, there was a kind of a big push to keep us away from working with other Marines, because it was kind of the proof of concept was supposed to determine if we could work outside of the Marine Corps.
Makes
So
sense.
that was when Fallujah kicked off, and about that time, we were a lot of our buddies were there in Force Recon platoons, and we really wanted to go in, and they were because of that they kept us out of that fight.
I was really impressed with the myriad of different missions that Det One did during this single deployment, from intelligence gathering, sniper operations, personal security detachment work, high value targets, going after HVTs. Pretty wild. If you tell us about the hunt for, as you call them, X and Z in your book.
Yeah, that was the one piece of information that we were given when we got on the ground, was that there were these two guys, both deck a card guys that were, for whatever reason, we weren't given their names. We were just X and Z, and they were, nobody knew anything about them. They were just guys who were always on the move, but they were really kind of the shadow guys running the show. And Z was the kind of the senior guy. X was one of his boys, but everybody had been after these guys. So we first started getting some info on X, and our intel guys were just churning on him. We were able to get some sources pretty close to him, but when we would, that guy and his family would be dead. So it was it was challenging. We wound up getting pulled off for a while, as you mentioned, to do this security detail, and I say that only because the guy that we were guarding was a Kurd, the Kurdish vice president of Iraq, and then the threat was becoming significant enough that as they started progressing towards the election, that they wanted us back on going after bomb makers. So eventually we roll up this guy that we believe to be X. He, a couple of days in interrogation, and he won't admit it. We bring in family members, and they're like, "Yep, that's him, that's him." And but the guy, there's no way this guy was going to talk. And we'd gotten to a point with the Iraqi interim government having taken control, that anybody that we were rolling up, if we wanted them to do any serious time or be put in prison, they were going to have to go through the Iraqi court system. And we had already, I didn't do it, but a couple of our guys had to go and testify, right, against these people on, hey, here's what we found during site exploitation. Here's where it was. So this guy had been, once we started kind of getting his backstory, responsible for the deaths of a lot of Kurds, as part of the Saddam's regime. And so we're like, how can we get this guy to talk? We're going to have to let him go if we didn't. And somebody came up with the idea, let's, hit up our new pal that we've been protecting for these weeks, the vice president, who's a Kurd, and ask him if he'll join us on a little trip out to, his kind of hometown territory. They're like, what would happen, right, if we turn this guy over to the Kurds? So now I didn't go on this particular mission. I wish I would have, but fly out and with the vice president of Iraq, this dude with the bag on his head named X, and then a bunch of our guys. We get him to a location where we turn him over to some Kurdish militia guys, and they pull off the bag. He recognizes the kind of the shit show that he's in, and we were not. The point had been made very clear. He was safe. All right, no one was going to do anything to him because we were, our guys were hanging out in the back. But once they started making their displeasure with him, known, he started coughing up, plenty of info. So more than enough to kind of seal the, make sure that he was going to be trapped for a while. So, and then once getting him kind of helped lead to this next guy, Z, and he had been someone that all of the kind of OGA organizations everybody had been after this guy.
He was a former regime guy, bath party dude that's on the deck of cards.
Yeah, and he absolutely had like incredible tradecraft, right? He was never in the same place. But one of our human intelligence guys was able to get and it took like a source to get another source closer, to get another source closer, and eventually we worked this young guy that we called the kid in as this guy's kind of gopher, and the kid eventually kind of worked his way up to the point where he was driving Z around, and we found out, I didn't know it at the time, but Z had been responsible for killing this kid's family, right? He wasn't a kid; he was probably 20 years old. So, which was why he was it wasn't about money for him. So we get a text or some communication that the following day Z is going to be having lunch with some other bigwigs in this very, very busy restaurant in a very, very bad part of Baghdad. So it was a place where he could kind of walk down the street, without fear. And we knew that they were going to have, lookouts on all the corners, and across the street there were a couple of mosques that were kind of known to just be full of fighters. So it was dicey, especially, we had all of our success by trying to hit a guy's house at 2 a.m, right? And doesn't, you get sleepy. So this was kind of a middle of the day thing. Somebody came up with the idea of, instead of there's no way really to come through and come in helos, you're going to be heard. You come in military vehicles, you're going to be seen, identified far enough out. So we got a bunch of vans, just used a bunch of vans, no armor. So it was a little dicey, but took the darker skinned, dark haired guys, threw them in headdresses and everything, and had them behind the wheels. And when the kid arrived, he gave us a code word that they were heading to the restaurant. And then when they got to the restaurant, he went into the bathroom and sent a text, and we were about 5 minutes out. So we were able to roll in, and we brought in some of the Polish Grom with us for external security on that, and rolled into a restaurant where pretty much everybody there was an anti-coalition. Pretty much everybody there had a gun, and then we had to figure out, obviously we found the driver, or the kid. We knew who he was, and then at this point we didn't even know have a good photo of Z. But we come in, roll them up. We're able to move quickly, kind of get everybody out before any shit kicked off, and by the time we got him back to back to our base by the airport, we were told that he was being taken away from us.
Right. He was such a big name that the big eye in the sky wanted him.
Yeah.
You also had this experience that I think is worth looking back on as you were doing this HVT targeting. You relate in your book about bringing one guy into the interrogation room, and you wanted to choke this guy out and kill him, but didn't because you knew it was the wrong thing to do. But it was sort of like this moment, like you had this sort of like realization about who you are, but also who we are as people, right?
Yeah, so the whole story kind of goes back a ways, but there was an American contractor who was
Yeah.
working, and he was like a cell phone contractor. His story is sketchy, right? There's some strangeness in his story, so
Yeah.
I'm not really uh, clear on it. But he was in Iraq, supposedly, working on cell phone towers. He gets, and this was right as the Abu Ghraib uh, scandal broke.
Right.
Right? We were, we had the ability to interrogate our prisoners for a couple of days, and when we were done with them, we would take them and drop them off at Abu G, which it wasn't far away. So after the story broke of all of the kind of bullshit that was going on there, this kid was found with his head chopped off on the side of the road, and then shortly thereafter, a video of him getting his head chopped off, surfaced. So this was happening. I think it happened like right as we were arriving in country, when he went missing, and then it was, we were up and running by the time they found his body, and then the video was released. So and there was, I think it was Solder that was chopped his head off. But
I thought it was Zarqawi.
no, you're right. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
So at any rate, we wind up getting a lead on the guy or a guy who was involved in this. So we wind up, rolling up. He lived in an apartment building, hid his house in the middle of the night like we did. And, we found a bunch of, bloody clothing in bags, and just CDs, stacks of CDs of the beheading. Right. So kind of
Pretty
fucking
clean,
damning.
Yeah.
clean bust. Yeah.
Yeah. So we bring him back, and we had National Guard soldiers that were used for security in the interrogation facility, but that time I was really fucking curious, right? I was like, hey man, can I like just be your security guy? One of our interrogators was going to go in with him, and he's like, yeah, man. Um, and I don't know. I had, you know, I had seen years before a video of a Chechen cutting off a head, and I mean the amount I mean, fuck, that's you got to really want to fucking take a guy's head off, right? To do that. So there's got to be some fucking hate involved in that. And I didn't get it. I was like, man, I kind of want to get it. I want to see this guy and see what he has to say. And so I'm standing in the back of the room. Just really my job is to kind of be intimidating. And the guy gets brought in, sat down. He's got a bag on his head. They pull the bag off, and looking at him, you're like, fuck, dude, I mean, this guy looks like a normal fucking dude. You know, what the hell is he doing? Involved in this bullshit. Um, so they interrogating him, and he's innocent, of course. He didn't do anything. He doesn't
Right.
know how all the bloody clothes got there, or how the CDs got there. But the interrogator sets a laptop down on the table and pushes the button. And I had been standing in the back of the room, and at that point I kind of got like pulled forward, right? And I don't want to sit there and watch this video again, but I find myself kind of with my hands on the chair, just, and I talk about that there and then there a lot about it, because it was kind of a moment that I mean, I would have paid money to, a paycheck to have been allowed to just choke that fucker to death. I didn't, and obviously, I didn't want to go to jail either, right? But it made me realize that everybody's capable of killing people. Sometimes we think because we're Marines or we're special operations or we're this or that, but I think anybody's capable of killing somebody if you push the right buttons.
You know, speaking of which, the sort of last hurrah for you, and with Det One at least, was you got called up to do some sniper operations. Was it up in Najaf?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was a blast. That was when Najaf had it kicked off a couple times, right? I think
Yeah.
2007 there was another big battle, but 2004 the so Najaf is one of the oldest cities in Iraq, and within it is it has the like on the outskirts of the town is the largest cemetery in the world. I mean, it's like a city, this place, and there's underground tombs. There's above ground. It's like a massive city made out of mud.
Wadi As-Salam, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and it's called the Valley of Peace, is what it means. Which was funny because we had the Marine Expeditionary Unit getting ready to go head to head with the Mahdi Army in this
The Valley of Peace.
in the Valley of Peace. But so we got called up, and it wasn't just us. So there were SEAL sniper teams went up. The Poles sent a team, and we wound up running into an SF team that was running around. But when we got up there, at the center of Najaf is the Ali Imam Ali Mosque, and I think it's the second or third holiest site for Shia Muslims, right? So it's no matter what you do, you can't fuck up this mosque, right? It's got the dome is actual gold. They're like golden tiles on top of this, and it's nobody was willing to do anything that might risk damaging the mosque, and consequently, the mosque complex was where there were a couple thousand dickheads. So the only people that were able to move beyond a perimeter that had been set were snipers, and so we got up there, wound up connecting with the 2-6 Cavalry, and in their sector, and they were like, hey, well, we can't go beyond this line, but we'll throw you in the back of vehicles. We'll get you up as far as we can, and then we'll provide a QRF in case shit really goes to shit. So we were able to move in as special operations sniper teams, and for the first couple of days, it was because we all got in position, kind of surrounding the city about the same time. The SEALs on the far side, the Poles were over here, and the insurgents assumed that they knew that nobody could come beyond this line because that had been the way that it had been. So, sun comes up the first morning and it's just like fish in a barrel, right? I mean, we were just crushing. You just hear sniper shots, boom, all kind of ringing the city.
You had the Shy Tac, right, which was a new thing at that time.
Yeah, it was. We took it. We shot it a couple of times. It was really too much gun for what we needed. There were a few times where we needed the Barrett, the 50 cal, to punch through things, but the Shy Tac wasn't quite enough ass to really punch through things, and it didn't know the Rafis ammo that we had for the Barrett. But primarily we were carrying 7.62 gas guns.
Yep.
The Mark 11s, and we had some M40 bolt guns. We kind of had. I took about seven. I think it was 7 snipers with me, and a JTAC, and then later we brought in some more guys. But for the first couple of days, it was like I said, just shooting nearly as fast as you could reload. After that, they started pulling out some pretty talented snipers. So we wound up with a couple of occasions, really thinking back to the things I'd read about Leningrad and, the sniper battles in World War II. And there was a lot of, little, putting our hats up on sticks and, trying to get a hold of periscopes to use. So a lot of things that are, in use now. I mean, every sniper runs around with a periscope. Like that was not something in the arsenal, um, back in
And
'04.
what were about the average engagement distances?
A lot of them were 100
Oh
and in. I
shit!
don't think anything much more than 300.
So you were right on top of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so you had to
Yeah,
start like using a lot of deception techniques as they got wise to you guys being out there.
yeah. I mean, we would move move every night, move to another
Hmm.
building, and yeah, try to have the army you know, do things to you know kind of make it seem like we were somewhere else. There's just whatever we could think of to kind of keep them on their toes. But we worked our way up and kind of started, with all the other sniper teams, moved into where we were, looking into the mosque compound, and it was at that point that, and I think somebody, I'm not, I don't quote me on it, but I got a report that total snipers, we had been responsible for 300, killing 300, uh, all of the soft snipers, and like 30 or 40 of their snipers. So it was
Turning the handle on
pretty,
the meat grinder.
or at least guys, and some of them, like I said, some of them were pretty talented. There was a guy that every time we poke our head up, a shot, not terribly accurate, but a shot would get come close. So we got down and we're finally able to pinpoint him to a building, and what we discovered he was doing was, which was a World War II tactic, was he had chipped out bricks in a couple of different rooms, and he would pull the brick out, take a shot, put the brick back in, move to another room, and so we brought in. That's the time when the two Sassers came in handy. So we brought in two 50 cals and just dropped the wall on them.
Oh shit!
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So after this one, you guys get returned back to your home station, and then really redeployed back home.
Hmm. Yeah. So we get back in it's late 2004. I think it was still 2004. Um, and then we're kind of twiddling our thumbs. All right.
It was sort of like, good job, Det One. You guys are awesome. Also, we don't need you anymore.
We'll
Right?
call you.
Well, we didn't know. We didn't know what was coming. So there was a new rumor almost every day. So we get back and we assume that we're probably going to deploy again. So we start training, and the smart money this time was on hey, they sent us to Iraq. This time they'll send us to Afghanistan. So we start getting back into reconnaissance training. Spending a lot of time up in Bridgeport, California, in the mountains, and trying to, what we saw as the issue with reconnaissance missions in Afghanistan at that time, especially, were that you can't stay out more than like 24 hours without compromise.
Right.
Right? It's just you couldn't do it. So so we'd come up with the idea of being able to go out, do your own reconnaissance, and then be light enough, but have enough that you could go do a direct action mission, from your observation post, and just cut down that time. So we started really, and it was really a really cool time experimenting. We a lot of time up in the mountains, just seeing like how light we could go, how much ammo can you carry, different ways of caching ammo and things, how experimenting with like eating sticks of butter and just high calorie food to keep you going. It's just really like nothing was off the table. So it was just kind of this cool think tank of hey, let's find ways to get lighter and lighter and be able to sustain ourselves for long periods of time. So while this is going on, kind of unbeknownst to us, there had been a couple of organizations that had done, the Center for Naval Analysis had done one, and somebody else had done an evaluation of our deployment. And it was, all glowing. Hey, that one did great, and so armed with that, the Commandant of the Marine Corps and the Commander of SOCOM go into Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, and say, hey, yeah, great. Everybody had a great experiment, but we don't want to continue it. Um, and Rumsfeld was, to his credit, was he's like, well, you're going to do this thing. I keep telling you, right? And they're like, no, we're good. We tried it. Didn't like it. And so he eventually said, hey, you're going to, instead of kind of letting you grow this small unit into a little bit bigger unit, you're going to form a two-star level component to SOCOM. So instead of being 100 dudes, it's going to be a couple thousand dudes that the Marine Corps would have to take out of hide. So it took about a year for that word to finally get down to us. So in the interim, like I said, we're just experimenting with stuff, training. Some of our guys were at retirement age and said, screw it, I'm out. We had some guys that had moved on to other units, and so there was a little bit of attrition, but for the most part, we were just kind of sitting there with our fingers crossed, hoping that we are going to get called to go out again. And that when it became clear that that wasn't going to happen, they told us that we were going to be disbanded about the same time that MARSOC was activated. And so I started, looking for a way to, and MARSOC was going to be primarily headquartered on the East Coast. I had spent, Det One, and most of my life had been out in California.
Tell us about that first interaction with MARSOC, where you show up and they throw the newspaper on the desk that says disgruntled Det One.
Yeah. That was, it was. I had not. There's a different mentality on the East Coast, Force Recon, than there was on the West Coast. We kind of, well, there's some guys that would cross over. A lot of us kind of stayed in our lane, and so you might go to school with an East Coast guy, but we just didn't mesh a whole lot. And Det One had been mostly West Coast guys, just by virtue of that's where the unit was. Although we did have a few guys from the East Coast, but yeah, so I check in, everybody I meet's great. They're heavy hitters. I'm, excited to be working with them. And then this captain comes and is like, hey, I need you to get in the car. Drives me to the base headquarters, and MARSOC was using some office space in there because we didn't have any of our own. And I get drug into what was, I think, the deputy commander of MARSOC's office. And there's this Marine Corps newspaper that says, the article is disgruntled Det One, and it, somebody or more than one person that talked to him and kind of said, hey, this is bullshit. We did a great job, and then we kind of get, unceremoniously disbanded, and I hadn't personally felt that way. We were going from 100 dudes to a couple thousand dudes. I saw that as a win, right? And that was based on all the work that we did. So, but I was, not terribly thrilled when I get drugged, from the range, when we're out on the range, out to this colonel's office so that he can like yell at me, and slap this paper down. So he was like, are you disgruntled? And I'm like, I wasn't 2 minutes ago, when I walked in here, but it's changing pretty fucking quickly. And the conversation deteriorated thereafter. I wound up becoming good friends with the guy, and he's a good guy. I don't know. He felt he needed to put his foot down or make a statement, I guess. But the early days, there were a lot of, definitely, starting a new organization of any sort, but especially, starting a special operations organization within the Marine Corps was was challenging, because there were a lot of Marines that were opposed to it. I mean, a lot of very senior Marines that were opposed to the whole idea, that didn't think it would last, and that now we just celebrated our 17th anniversary at MARSOC, so I think we're doing okay.
And so you have this very interesting experience of, Force, Det One, helping to stand up MARSOC the last couple of years of your career, and now continuing to this day to work as a civilian employee there, helping to train, the next generation of raiders. I would really love to hear any insights you have about that experience, from standing up MARSOC from almost nothing to today. Any insights about that progression and evolution of a unit and what it takes to stand up a unit and create a capability?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was primarily responsible for standing up the school. So when I came out from Det One to here, it was initially to run the CQB training. Um, I got here and I'd been promoted to master sergeant, and so I quickly kind of got rolled into the position that's at the time it was called chief instructor. So I was kind of in charge of all of the courses that we ran, which was great because I had absolutely we had kind of innovated some things with CQB. We brought in people to help us innovate. So we had a lot of ideas about ways to do things better than we had been doing them. I brought, or I didn't bring him with me, one of the Marines who had been in my team and had been my sniper partner in my team, came with me as well and was assigned to the school. So, between the two of us, we had like a big checklist. Like, hey, here's all of the shit that we're gonna, stop doing. Here are the things that we're gonna start doing. And it's a little bit of a rocky road, but I mean, we were really building from a cadre of probably, 20 instructors if we were lucky to, today we probably have 250. So it's grown exponentially, and obviously we've added, when we started, we taught CQB and sniping, and urban reconnaissance. That's grown now to language courses and intel courses and kind of what have you, along with our assessment and selection program and our operator, the individual training course that trains raiders. So I think to answer your question, it was the opportunity on a small scale to kind of start up Det One. Those lessons definitely paid benefit. When it came time to start up something on a bigger scale, but it's a whole different beast. Like I said, when you're trying to develop a training program that's going to take Marines from any military occupational specialty and turn them into raiders. And it was a unique opportunity, and I got to travel down to Q course and out to buds and talk with guys out there and see the way other people are doing it. And so it was a really cool time.
How do you see, and have you seen over the years, I know the Marine Corps has this storied history, being very regimented and rigid, but also throughout Marine Corps history, there is a lot of irregular warfare there. I'm curious to ask you, how you saw these Marines kind of slotting into a special operations role and sort of grow into a more unconventional role.
Yeah, it's the Marine Corps is an odd beast, right? In the book, I call it a cult, but a good cult. But it's, like I said, the Marine Corps considers itself, a special operations organization, but hates it if someone else in the Marine Corps is considered more special. But the Marine Corps has a long history of, not, irregular warfare, like you said. I mean, we wrote the Small Wars manual. We stood up the World War II Raiders, the first, the first special operations unit in U.S. history. were heavily involved in the OSS. When that was stood up, and there were, you know, the OSS was almost the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps was also almost given that mission, and they fought it off. And that's how they kind of got saddled with forming the Raiders. It's a fascinating history. If you read the President Roosevelt wanted to bring Bill Donovan into the Marine Corps and make him a general. And I have copies of these letters, typed up by generals in the Marine Corps, like bitching and moaning to each other about it, that I was able to find in an archive. But so yeah, the Marine Corps is during the Banana Wars, and in and around World War One, they were, Chesty Puller was the military governor of Nicaragua. So we had guys who were operating at incredibly high levels, thinking way outside the box, doing things that seem to kind of be unmarine like in some ways. But in Vietnam, the Force Recon guys were on par with anybody. It was working. So it's been odd. I mean, in the early days, we were getting a lot of especially infantry officers that would try out and just could not wrap their head around the idea that yeah, I'm a great infantry officer, but I'm not making it here, right? Because I'm not able to think differently, right? Not able to look at situations, through other lenses, basically.
And what about the younger enlisted guys? Do you think they had an easier time like adapting because they were more malleable?
Yeah, I think so. I think, especially, people always say that, the younger generations, this or that, the guys that we have coming in are, a hell of a lot smarter than I am. Really fit, and definitely able, obviously much more computer savvy, but able to think, laterally, outside the box, whatever you want to call it, critically and creatively, more than kind of was the case, 10 years ago. So I think the one thing that they don't, and it's not their fault, it's just kind of a product of the world that we live in, is just sheer mental toughness. Like it's in most cases they haven't had situations where they were training, in the Marine Corps careers that was quite as austere as was common 20 years ago, well, before the war.
And how do you see, back to the sort of issue of the evolution of MARSOC, like capabilities wise, how have you seen it go from, working out of a couple Connex containers to today it's an institution, right?
Yeah. I think, I mean, we've had our own, commanded SOTFs. We've had, TSOC commanders. We've pretty much, I think we're pretty well inculcated, across the board within SOCOM. And there was, early on, there was definitely some pushback in the early days, and most of it came from the Army. The SEALs were always, I think they realized pretty quickly that, hey, if we can, get these guys on our side, we're sister naval service guys, we can at least have a little more ass to fight back, because there's the joke goes that SOCOM is spelled ARMY. I think the Army makes up like 60 some percent.
Yeah. Well,
we're 3%.
And before we move on to some questions that our viewers have for you, last one for me at least. Oh my God, it just escaped my mind. I wanted to ask you about roles and capabilities. Like, I know there's maybe some OPSEC issues, but maybe at a more general level, how do you see MARSOC like slotting into the larger special operations community over, I know they're already there, but also in the next like 10 years? I mean, what like unique role do you see them filling that maybe the other units aren't?
Good question. That's a part of a really long and ongoing process within MARSOC to, kind of figure out what is the way forward, both, you know, making sure that we kind of tie into the Marine Corps force design, that the way they're looking at the future. Um, I think there's absolutely it's not a secret that we're shifting focus back into our kind of background in reconnaissance, littorals, in the waters up to up onto the beach and inland. So I think, yeah, more focus on that reconnaissance. Technology is growing by leaps and bounds. So watching what's going on in Ukraine, there's obviously a lot of lessons learned there that we're taking to heart.
I would, before we get to questions, I wanted to ask because the Marine Corps got rid of their scout sniper platoons, which almost feels blasphemous, right? Because, I mean, the Marine Corps, one of the things they were known for was their scout snipers. Now we have MARSOC, which fills this very vital role, but you still have battalion recon, I think, right? And still have
Yes.
still have Force Recon, and Force Recon hasn't, to my knowledge, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but they haven't been brought into the SOCOM umbrella. So where does that leave these sort of in between units, and what do you think of the state platoons going away?
So yeah, yesterday I was trying to rep the Scout Sniper Association by wearing my shirt today. Um, yeah, I had the opportunity to go to the final Scout Sniper graduation last year, and it was a sad day. But so there are still we have a sniper course, the MARSOC Advanced Sniper Course, and Recon has a sniper course, the called the Recon Sniper Course. So there's still snipers in the Marine Corps, but in reconnaissance and in MARSOC, the the state platoons or the sniper platoons within the infantry battalions are being converted into scout platoons. So I don't fully understand it. They're not There's not a sniper school and they're not going to train snipers, but they still have scoped weapons and they still have a really similar role. They're beefing them up, so they're growing a little bit. I think that the sniper school has been, and it's the same reason. The Marine Corps disbanded it post World War One, post World War
Right.
Two, post they didn't even really have much of the way of snipers in Korea, and then post Vietnam again. So I think I think they'll make their way back, and hopefully they will. But at present, Recon Battalion is still filling the same role that they always have.
Hmm.
Force Recon is smaller than it was. It used to be a company of anywhere from 5 to 8 platoons, and now it's a much smaller footprint. But they still will continue to be heavily involved in the force design 2030, and then heavily involved in providing commanders, service commanders' eyes and ears.
So we got a bunch of Patreon questions for you, and for people who are watching, there's a link down in the description if you want to subscribe to our Patreon and ask our guests questions. You also get access to all these episodes ad-free. Brian asks, when standing up a force during active conflict, how did you balance existing needs versus future requirements?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think we were only able to see so far in front of us for future requirements with Det One. Anyway, I mean, we knew that we were going to have a life cycle, and then we were going to be over. I think possibly talking to it from the perspective of MARSOC is a little more apropos, but I think we didn't do a great job of that, of really thinking towards future requirements, just because we really didn't. I mean, a lot of people didn't know how long we were going to exist. There was always kind of the threat that we cost too much money, and the SOCOM doesn't want us, and the Marine Corps is going to get rid of us. So a lot of when you're being built in the middle of a fight, you've got to focus on what you need for that fight.
Hmm.
I think as we've things, the situation changed both in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, everywhere. We started adjusting with that. But over the last 10 years, I think we've had enough time to sit back a little bit and start looking at, hey, how do we make sure that we're building the unit, the organization, for the missions of the future.
Norm has a great question that reminds me of a funny story in your book. He says, "Does meditation really work, or is it all in my mind?"
I don't know. I think it does. The story though it is pretty funny. I've always been a I mean, I'll try anything, right? And I've always kind of felt that there's got to be more to it than just the ability to shoot, move, and communicate. From that gunfight in Afghanistan, I realized that there's I need to get a lot smarter, right, about the psychological effects and the physiological impacts of a gunfight, but look for ways. I always wanted to look for ways to make myself and my guys more capable. So, for a while, I was really hell bent on speed reading software because I thought that would help, just speed up our ability to see, speed up your ability to identify a target and shoot. Um, you know, we if there's something kind of new, I was in a phase where I would try anything. And meditation became one of those. So I started getting into it, and I wish I was into it a little bit more, but I still believe in it. But right, the first group of guys who were going to be MARSOC's instructors, I brought them into a room, and I brought this lady, a really nice lady who had volunteered, a meditation instructor, her time to come and teach. So she talked for a little while, and all the instructors were kind of sitting there nodding their heads. And then she was like, "Hey, so we're going to all sit down and do like 20 minutes of meditation. Close your eyes." And so I'm sitting there in the front, with my eyes closed, and like I hear the door, and then I hear the door again, and I'm like, "All right, focus on my breathing or whatever." And by the time the 20 minutes is up, I open my eyes, and me and her, right? We're the only ones there. Everybody else had left. So,
Yeah, you win some, you lose some.
yeah.
Uh, Jefferson asks, "Did you serve with now Lieutenant General Donovan? If so, what was he like back then and in such a new unit?"
So yeah, old Frank Donovan. I I served with him first at First Force. We not in the same platoon together, but he was a platoon commander there, and then with Det One, he arrived after our deployment. So when we thought that we were going to recock and deploy again, he got there, and he was the one who came up with this idea of patrolling a deep reconnaissance mission into an assault. His term for it was pursuit operations. So and then yeah, he's done pretty well for himself. I just had the opportunity to see him and have dinner with him a couple of months ago. He was he was incredibly driven as a young captain and major. I remember he used to at First Force he used to set up these uh, orienteering days where it was usually there'd be a helicopter you'd helicast in, swim into the beach, and then you and your teammate would have to move around and navigate like a 20-30 mile movement over the course of a day, find points. At each point there would also be like some questions you had to answer, or like a Kim's game thing that you had to remember. And if you won, you got bragging rights. But he's still pretty damn fit. Last I saw him, and he was always a excellent reconnaissance Marine and a good leader and somebody that you knew was going places.
That's all we got for Patreon.
Okay. So real quick, I saw a couple of people. Daniel Kirby says, "Hey Ranger D, my cousin Grasshopper says, what's up? Enjoyed your book."
Excellent.
And then Andy also said hello. Andy Milburn.
Oh, howdy, Andy.
Yeah, thanks, Andy, for chiming in.
Yeah. Joe, thank you very much. Do you foresee MARSOC getting their own Tier 1 unit? What is holding back SOCOM from forming a CAG SEAL Team 6 type Marine unit?
Spicy.
Yeah. I've heard talk about it. And that talk is extended back a couple of years. I don't know if it'll happen. I mean, I know there are a lot of Marines that would be thrilled if it did. I would not think it's something that's going to happen too terribly soon. I mean, we're small, right? We're like I said, we're 3% of SOCOM's manpower. Although, according to last check, I think we do 10% of the missions. So, it's the thing that Marines kind of have always done, punch above our weight class. But yeah, I wouldn't hold your breath too long for that one. But I'd love to see it.
Yeah. And also, Joe, thank you very much. Where do you see the Raiders going in the future? Ideally, would you want to see the program unit? Ideally, where would you want to see the program unit go and why? And what changes would you like to see?
Ooh, good question. The one thing I should have said earlier is that obviously, in all of anything I'm saying, in my opinion, right, it doesn't represent MARSOC's or SOCOM's. I'm a big believer in, and I always have been, in us getting back to the roots of reconnaissance and really becoming, being the best at that. I think the definition of reconnaissance has expanded hugely over the past decade with the avenues that have been opened up through technology. So I think that's the direction. If I were, the commanding general for a day, that's the direction I would like to see.
And the last question is the spiciest: high ready, or low ready for standard position moving through a complex?
Low, always low.
The right answer.
The right answer.
So, Tough Rugged Bastards is the book. I hope you guys will go and check it out. I finished reading it last night. There's a link down in the description. It's a terrific piece of history and a really well-written, insightful memoir. I hope you guys will go check it out. John, is there anything else you want to tell people or anything you want to plug? You want to tell folks where they can find out more about the Scout Sniper Association?
Definitely what we're pushing right now is actually the Scout Sniper Heritage organization, which I think is just scoutsniperheritage.org. One of the projects that we're working on is trying to get a Scout Sniper Memorial built at the Marine Corps Museum in Quantico, Virginia. So scoutsniperheritage.org, you can check that out. You can buy a brick to commemorate a sniper that you knew and make donations. My website is jadailey.com. And there's info about the book, obviously, but I also write a couple of weekly emails that go out. One's just called Walking Point. It's kind of translates some military things into ways to make yourself better, and the other's called Ruck the Fuck Up, and it's strangely enough about rucking mostly.
Yeah, because you've become a ultra marathon runner in your quote unquote retirement.
I have. I've kind of stopped becoming an ultra marathon runner recently, but yeah, who knows if I'll pick it up again.
And real quick, I want to tell people out there, please go and check out my book, We Defy, The Lost Chapters of Special Forces History. It's up for pre-order now, be released on December 9th. And this coming Friday, Joe Musia is going to be on the show. He is also a former Marine and the author of Cry Havoc, which is about the Rangers that jumped into Grenada in 1983. I'm super excited to talk to him about that, kind of an untold story, another untold chapter of special ops history. John, thank you for joining us tonight, man, really.
Man, thanks for having me. I had a blast.
Fantastic.
All right, we'll see all you guys on Friday. Take care out there.